esteemed guests, Ms. Pallavi Mulay, Ms. Anita Ranjan, Mr. Yogesh Kulkarni, our program chair of School of Economics, Dr. Ishfaq, faculty members, and my very dear students, a very good morning and welcome to Budget Pe Charcha 3.0. The Indian Budget 24-25 presented on July 23, 2024 focused on boosting infrastructure, employment, skilling and manufacturing while maintaining fiscal prudence. I'm sharing few key highlights, 11 points. I will be talking on 11 points, important one, and more will be shared by our esteemed experts who are here with us today. I will pick up the points. I will talk about the strengths that has been there because of the budget and the areas of improvement. I won't call it weakness, but the areas of improvement. Healthcare, we start with. We have increased allocation in healthcare. Budget increased by 10%, totaling to 2.5 lakh crore. However, areas of improvement on this. Limited focus on rural healthcare despite higher rural population. We need to have probably given more thought on that. And low percentage of GDP on healthcare spending. It is approximately 1.2% of GDP, which is below global average of 3.4, which typically is spent on an average worldwide. We should not forget 17 SDGs. You're aware about that, right? Sustainable Development Goals. And healthcare is one of the important part of that. On education, again, good job. Education funding increased by 15%, totaling to 1.8 lakh crore. There is some focus on digital learning as well. However, insufficient funding for physical infrastructure upgrades, especially in schools, so rural areas. There is still quality gaps in terms of reforms in school education, teacher training, curriculum updation. We cannot afford to have it. If we have to look for next 10 years at least, we have to start reforms, especially in school education right now. Because 10 years, 1 to 10 years, once they finish 10, 12 years of their education in schools, then they are ready for higher education. In higher education, still we are much comfortable and very, very competitive globally. India is very, very competitive globally in higher education. In school education, we are yet to have a lot of reforms. On agriculture sector, there is higher subsidies, welcome step. Increase in agricultural subsidies by 20%. Crop insurance is enhanced. Insurance coverage is there because of which we need to have for crops. However, there is slow progress on comprehensive agriculture reforms. Insufficient investment in modern farming technology. In today's time, we cannot afford to have traditional ways of having crops and agriculture. We need to have modern farming and need to have investment on that also. On climate change, again, allocation of climate action increased to 50,000 crore. Still below the recommended 1% of GDP for environmental spending. Insufficient measures for pollution control and waste management. Again, we cannot forget 17 SDGs. We need to connect it with 17 SDGs. Once we try to focus on working on 17 SDGs, we'll find that these are the areas of weaknesses. Then on social security, we need to have this understanding that 90% of our workforce is in informal sector, unorganized sector. There's a huge percentage of the manpower. New schemes have been introduced for them. Introduction of new social security schemes for workers in unorganized sector. Expanded the coverage for pension and healthcare for those workers. However, poor implementation strategies and administrative inefficiencies are still creating hurdles. Limited financial resources allocated compared to the need. We cannot forget those areas of manpower. Tax reforms, again, a very interesting area, especially for students of economics. Middle class relief, they got little relief this time. However, on GST, these are the complexities that still remain. GST still remains complex with multiple slabs. Minimal impact because of little tax reforms initiative which have been taken. This has got minimal impact on inflation and overall consumption spending. We come to MSMEs. Increased funding for affordable credit schemes, that's a good step. Introduction of technology adoption subsidies, because that is an area where they need to have spending on technology, and for that they need to be subsidized, because bigger companies, they have big pockets, deep pockets, they can afford to have spending and adopt technology, but the MSME, they need to be subsidized. And there's a good step, a good initiative on that. However, there are compliance burdens. Persistent issues with regulatory compliance and paperwork, and limited support for MSMEs facing high, stiff competition. About women empowerment, good step, welcome step in terms of skilling programs, introduction of new skilling programs for women, increased support for women entrepreneurs. We could find some of these initiatives in the budget. However, there is slow progress in closing the gender participation, that gap. Programs are still not extensive enough to address widespread gender disparities. If we see the compensation, if we see the participation, if we see the inclusivity, there is still enough that needs to be done. It's not enough. Rural development, welcome step, the initiative the government has taken in this budget, that is increase funding for rural infrastructure totaling to 1.2 lakh crore. However, again, underemployment related issues are still there in rural areas, persistent issues with underemployment and migration that still remains. Slow pace of infrastructure development in rural areas. In urban areas, still it's better, but in rural areas, if we have to see the companies going to rural areas, we have to work a lot on having infrastructure, because how companies are going to have their functions in rural areas. The 10th one, urban housing. Introduction of new affordable housing projects is a welcome step. Increase the subsidies for low-income housing units. However, there is a shortage, deficit of around 20 million units as of now. There is slow progress in the execution of housing projects. So implementation part, that part looks like a little area for having attention. About fiscal, last one, fiscal policy. Growth-oriented spending, that's a welcome step. Increased budget allocation for infrastructure and social welfare. Maintain fiscal deficit target at 4.9%. It is towards the direction for next year to have 4.5%, as we see in the news. However, we cannot forget that higher fiscal deficit is required for growth. So, fiscal deficit target limits growth-oriented spending. You are aware about that, especially economics students should be. So, it is expected to have a balance on that, set higher fiscal deficit target to 5.5% of GDP. Thank you so much. This is all I could say. A few points on the budget. Thank you.